economic growth. And I think the barriers have been easy to overcome as we're partnering with everyone from training institutions to other state agencies. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, well, so like anecdotally, would you just say it just took time to kind of get that message out and get them on board? I guess that's how it had to kind of resolve itself?
Yeah, it's time and it's money. You know, money is very helpful in overcoming barriers, and we've addressed things such as the time, you know, people can only go to training at certain times. You know, webinars work better for some and not for others, so we've had funds to really support a variety of training delivery mechanisms that have addressed some of those barriers. So I think it's time and money and flexibility.
Richard, I'll also just point out, complimenting what Adele says, one name that I meant to drop that I forgot to was the Solar Energy and Storage Association of Puerto Rico. PJ Wilson is running that organization, and they provide a forum to implement the kind of programs that Adele's talking about. And the installers that are there, you know, they actually can be the training resource as well. So there can be some really good complementary activity.
And there are a couple of thousand registered solar companies just in Puerto Rico.
Yes, in the back.
Yes, my question is for Xian Yang Chan. So I really like that animation, that video. I never saw it. And I wanted to get more of your thoughts in terms of the less inertia or inertia-less system with the power electronics that is now emerging, and it's particularly with the more distributed power generation with energy storage. Because I heard different things, and it's an area that I am interested, but maybe you can provide a little bit more of what do you think is possible now in terms of massively distributed generation, and what could be possible in the near future, the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, so I also heard different voices. I attend regularly ISF DOE workshop panels. So some people like inertia, some people don't like inertia. I guess there's different reasons for that. But I feel that on the high level, there will be a solution for that. I'm not too worried about that. But I feel that what is needed is, I believe, more communication between different players. Obviously, right now, all the generators behave in a certain way defined by physics, right? So now we have this freedom to define how inverters behave under different conditions. But the challenge is that how can you make sure that all the vendors are following certain things. So I see different ways to control inverter, and obviously at some point that we will merge to something. But again, this is a process that we have to go through. Thanks.
Over there on the left. Yeah.
My name is Karen. I'm from Rocky Mountain Institute. It's a question for Adele. A question and some ideas. Aquanair is another local association in Puerto Rico that you might want to be in touch with. They also have some installer members, other than Aquanair, good ones. But we're also creating a community practice here that has community practice in the Caribbean. It's Caribbean-wide community that engages in webinars and trainings online where utilities and other industry professionals can learn from one another and engage in the renewable energy industry. And I think something like what you presented could be helpful and interesting to dovetail what we're doing, not only sort of Puerto Rico, but the whole Caribbean, and sort of having material, whatever the materials are, or the curriculum that you're offering. At least it could be an interesting start to have you lead a webinar or something on our platform to start to engage there.
That would be great. And you mentioned PJ and Aquanair. When we went to Puerto Rico, we sat with a group of 50 individuals that was really assembled by the Clinton Foundation. And it was a great start. And we know we need to do a lot more work, so we're excited to help in any way we can. And the partnership I mentioned with SUNY and CUNY, they developed PV curriculum with NYSERDA funding many years ago, and we have the rights to all that curriculum. But SUNY and CUNY are willing to share the curriculum, the modifications they've made to it over time, They have curriculum, some of them have it in Spanish, they have some great instructors that can teach in Spanish, so we're happy to share anything we have.
Great, great. And I know there's like the Solar Foundation and a few of the groups that are doing PAC Recital, and I know is doing some training in Puerto Rico. So there's a lot going on there. Let's talk.
Yeah, I briefly mentioned we're in the proposal with the Solar Foundation and PAC Recital. It's over $4 million to expand training, technical assistance to businesses all in Puerto Rico, so we're hoping to have an announcement very soon on that. Thank you.
Okay.
Question here, yes.
Hi, I'm Dave Chan from the University of Minnesota. My question, I'm really interested in energy efficiency and demand response in the context of Puerto Rico. And one of the questions, I saw legislation as 30% as the goal for energy efficiency. But how is that being implemented? I think one of the big challenges is what's the baseline? And with Puerto Rico, especially after the hurricanes, the population decline, a lot of industry shifting around. How do we think about that baseline? How is that playing into the IRP? Is there a risk of overbuilding back? And so what's going on with efficiency as it relates to transition?
Well, the short answer is that currently there's a 30% energy efficiency legislation, but unfortunately the latest news is that they're trying to remove that. Simply because of what we just alluded, it would be kind of difficult to identify the best way to include that in long-term planning for the base load. So it's kind of Puerto Rico now, I think, is in a stage where there's a lot of regulation legislation that's being proposed. It's not really following the actual technical future implementation. So to answer your question, is that it's unfortunately probably is going to be removed at 30% energy efficiency.
And I would say that's a terrible shame. I think the answer to the question is, can be looked at in the simplest possible way. That if you want a baseline, just look at the baseline in overall energy usage, establish a goal in overall energy usage, and then that's easily tracked. And in terms of what measures to do and when, generally, as long as you can figure out ahead of time which ones are cost effective and which are not, incentivize the ones that are cost effective, and then do as much as possible. Because generally they're more cost effective than generation or even controls. So just pour as much money as you've got that will cover those cost effective ones and do as much as fast as you possibly can. With special attention to the effectiveness in terms of time specificity, so that it will support that intermittent generation that Richard talked about.
And you do have to look at the marketplace and be aware that people in Puerto Rico use a lot of electricity for air conditioning. And if you look at a lot of black roofs with air conditioning units on them, it's not the most efficient way of deploying technology, and that's something that has to be looked at.
And thank you for doing the Minnesota Solar Pathway Study. Awesome.
One question, yes?
So not very long ago, I wrote a blog piece on the problem of portability with renewables. I'm sorry, I'm Sandy Smith from UNC Chapel Hill, producer of the film last night.
I like that.
So one of the themes that's recurring in many countries like Puerto Rico, where you have a lot of poor people that need to get to solar and relatively rapid transition because their infrastructure is not working well. Greece is the other example I'm looking at. Is affordability, and renewables aren't really hitting the mark on that in many places. And under Portunio in Puerto Rico, there was sort of a disastrous move towards solar, which produced a lot of affordable solar. So I guess my question is, how does affordability factor into your approaches, especially for large projects in a place like Puerto Rico?
Okay.
Where the cost per kilowatt hour is already so high, as you know.
I'll begin, and then I'll have a
Sure.
contrarian.
Yeah. We saw in several talks today that the cost of building the infrastructure was more than an order of magnitude higher than the cost of building distributed solar. So that belies the notion that solar is more costly. Even if you ignore the infrastructure costs, that those billions of dollars, 20 billion instead of 1.4 million that one talk claimed in terms of infrastructure versus building standalone PV distributed on people's roofs, even if you took that out of the equation, the cost of generating just the power itself from fossil fuels is considerably greater in Puerto Rico than generating from solar. Add the two together, it's massively cheaper to do solar right now. So, you know, I think if done right, and if we can get the commitment to do the one instead of the other, you could say solar is cheaper than any other alternative.
Well, if you look at it simply, Puerto Rico imports a couple of $1 billion worth of fossil resources every year. Take that money and put it someplace else. And functionally, Puerto Ricans do not generally pay federal taxes, but systems installed in Puerto Rico are capable of having 40% of their costs reduced by a federal tax rebate if owned by entities that pay federal taxes. So a vast resource could be unleashed just by tapping into that.
So all we gotta do is talk crap and hydroxy and whole gas thing, and also divert that all money. And we're good.
$1 snap switch would.
But I'd like
Your lips to God's
I'd
ear.
like to add a dimension to that discussion. Solar looks expensive because it's often an individual decision. I cannot afford it to put it on my roof, and it should not be. That's maybe why solar is still a marginal resource, is that it's left to the people to make their own decision to build the utility of tomorrow, and it should not work that way. Solar has to grow up, and if you look at the numbers, it's a lot cheaper to make electricity in Puerto Rico with PV than with anything else. So it's going to be cheap solar for all in the end, but we have to get there with intelligent regulations. Currently, it's left to the people, and it looks expensive to the people to buy a $10,000 PV system and storage for home. But it shouldn't be that way. If people buy that system, they should buy it. It could be on their roof, it could provide resiliency, but they should pay for it like they pay for electrical power today from coal or whatever where it comes from. It should be the same. 15 cents per kilowatt hour, and your system is on your roof, and you get the service. It's that dichotomy that's been in play of solar for many years. It should not be left to the people to put it on their roof and their own little decision in their own little realm to do that. And I'm guilty of that. That's a decision I made on my own home. I live on a nanogrid, microgrid. I can go through outages. But I could afford it because I'm a SUNY professor. But I realize not anybody can do that, and it's not the way the system should grow up. It should be, bottom line, solar is going to be the cheapest way to do electricity for all.
Yeah, I just want to say something else there in terms of, let's say, making it easier at least for some, let's say, low and medium income in Puerto Rico. There's this the program that I mentioned before, is providing 436 million to small commercial and residential, and then this Oasis program by the Department of Housing, which then is going to donate completely the PV system and solar solution to the least less lucky people that way. So there's a way to try to help those people, even though there's going to be really few 100,000 people, just really few families.
Have those funds been released? I thought Carson was holding on to those funds.
I mean, I'm sure there's some people here in the audience can answer probably the questions better than me. I can recognize some local, say some Puerto Rican faces that I've seen around the event. As far as my understanding is that it's not being released yet.
I think to add something to that, it's just that you make a really good point about affordability. Part of the purpose, or part of the reason we're having to wait for these funds is because there's no financing available for low-income people with no credit history or informal businesses that deal in cash. There's a lot of hurdles to folks like Sunrun who do offer
there are a lot of credit unions in Puerto Rico. Their only holdback has been so far that, besides the credit level that you have to reach, is that they all had a different application process. They are seemingly talking about unifying that and making the money available. If you look at that as a dollar per dollar trade, if you invest in that solar system, you're actually making a profit on month one by switching away from buying power from PREPA. So it's not like people are going to have to extend vast amounts of money to switch over. It's just that they don't have the capital available to them through normal borrowing means to make that decision.
But hey, private foundations are awesome in what they can do, and they do have a lot of bucks, but nothing compared to what the government has. We got to hold the government's feet to the fire and say, peel off $1 billion of that $20 billion and solve the entire program. Just 5%.
Yes.
I want to say I like the way the conversation is going, because we're not talking about gas versus solar, but we are talking about what kind of solar future we should build in Puerto Rico, because there's science to back it up, right? It's not just based on a dream or environmentalist dream. It's actually based on many things. And in that sense, I've seen many interesting talks today, presentations, and I wanted to ask your opinion in terms of how to balance the rooftop solar, which I think it has a priority. But I also see that utility scale solar has an important place, especially because of the economies of scale, even though it has a drawback because of the resiliency and stuff. But have any of you have looked at what would be a good mix between those two? I mean, a mix between two solar, right? The rooftop solar with batteries, and utility scale solar and utility scale batteries in the future.
Yeah, you put your finger right on the problem that has to be solved. And we're actually looking at it exactly the same for that island in the Indian Ocean that we're working with. Some of we don't have all the answers yet, but some of the elements of discussion is that you want the things on the rooftop for resiliency, and you want all the systems to be kind of connected when things work normally to do 100% PV. So they are distinct objectives, but you don't need one to do the other. But they are not incompatible. That's the good thing about it. You can develop both, and they can talk to each other. So that would be quite an achievement if Puerto Rico could demonstrate that. Under normal conditions, you have all those rooftop systems participating as virtual power plants in the big thing, and when push comes to shove of severe weather, then you have the local resiliency. And my own example, I live in a nanogrid 10 miles south of here. I've been through several power outages. Couple of years ago, I upgraded, I took advantage of the system that favors individuals like me to own big PV systems in New York. I built a 10 kilowatt PV system on the roof. I had batteries, everything. But I wish my choice had been smarter than that, and I was not offered that choice by the system. I wish I had kept a 1 or 2 kilowatt system on my roof so I could have resiliency, because I don't need more when things are bad, and own the rest of my PV somewhere else where it makes sense for the big picture. The system is not tailored to do that yet, and that's exactly what we have to evolve into. Go from the margin to the big solar.
And an interesting thing about Richard's system in his house, which I'm proud to have helped him design and build many years ago, is that he's using Sonnen batteries along with the PV. Sonnen is very active in Puerto Rico right now, and it's already its second and overtaking its first largest market in the Western Hemisphere. And what they do, will be doing in Puerto Rico is what they already do in Europe, which is tie many very small residential systems via software and technology into a big virtual power plant. And so those small residential ones can act like a very large power plant. Still, your question is correct. We need a healthy mix of physically large solar farms as well as the distributed gen.
Well, be at the same time sensitive to the critical needs, which is critical infrastructure materials like hospitals and police stations and sewage treatment, and also critical homes that are not going to be served well by the existing utility.
One question here, and then we'll have to wrap up.
What's the one wind representative?
Yes.
I do have to point out the fact that at halftime at Star, and that Puerto Rico is probably the belt that has the most persistent winds on the planet. And so you're looking at where Minnesota is probably a really sweet spot. The mix of wind, offshore and offshore plus solar, would probably be really good. Ideally what you want in the mix. By adding wind in and further increasing the balance of variability and dispatchability issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Wind and solar is better than either one separately. It's cheaper and it's...
Were the people able to hear that? Because it was more of a comment than a question. Were people able to hear it? Yeah. He's saying the wind is complementary in terms of the time of delivery to solar, and he's getting a lot of nods from up here.
Yeah, but the study for Puerto Rico has yet to be done. We never looked at the numbers yet.
Yeah, there's two big solar wind farms in Puerto Rico now, but I know when you hear about future conversation, you don't hear much about wind. It's more concentrated on solar.
One last question.
Just very quickly, in terms of firming power, there's been most of the discussions around batteries. Do you guys think that pumped hydro storage, which currently is
yeah, it's a very good point.
Yeah, do you think there's
for me, it's
too many
storage.
barriers to approval for pumped hydro storage to be relevant to the timeframes we're talking about, or is there room for a combination of
Yeah, storage is storage. So if it's you take the least cost option, there is some opposition with pumped hydro. I just came back from Chile where we had the Solar World Congress, and I could see people signing the valley, not to the pumped hydro that they were planning to do. Chile is trying to be 100% solar, and there were people ticketing in front of where they were planning to build one. So these things are big, and you flood space, and so whereas batteries are getting a lot cheaper, and you may see tons of them in cars in a few years. So that's going to be a giant storage system running into the electric vehicles.
Yeah, so in the time that it takes, I was involved in a New Jersey pump storage project. You know, it's going to take years, if not decades, to develop and build the thing. And by that time, you know, we may have passed it up in terms of how cheap lithium-ion batteries are going to be and how many electric cars will be on the road. So, you know, the investors would have to approach it with some trepidation.
Francesco, you wanted to add something about storage?
And yeah, I just want to say that there's one company, it's called HDF from France. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
HDF? Oh, wow. Yeah, I know those guys.
Yeah, so they're doing a big, let's say, project in Barbados using the hydro technology as one of the storage solution, and as insight from someone that is in Puerto Rico now, they're also looking to duplicate the model in Puerto Rico. So that's your question.
All right, we are past our allotted time, and it takes a good 10 minutes to go to the next phase. So thank you for being here, and thanks again.
Of course,